The logic of the Eightfold Path is how one factor supports another, and how one flows into another, to a right view, understanding skillful, unskillful, understanding nature of cause and effect. There are cause and effects, making that decisive turning, recognizing one as an inheritance, mother, father, sentient beings, one's in some kind of web of conditionality, and cultivating right attitude, where you're coming from, non-violence, non-brutality, non-discord, avoidance of harshness, insensitivity, relinquishment, non-fascination with sense data. Yeah, I mean, these are often put in cryptic terms, or classical terms, Important to get a feeling for what these are talking about, and recognizing, this is something you sustain. You bear it in mind, you're mindful. It means you sustain this template. So everything you're looking at, whether it's internal, external, or whether it's the way you handle your spittoons, or, is it dismissive, insensitive, crashing around, or is it careful? Because it doesn't really matter what the object is, because this is subject training, not object training. It means you're training the heart, training awareness to respond, to send out energies that are not abusive, disrespectful, insensitive, clinging, grasping, to sense data. And so, then you make an effort with that, realizing, the mind does swerve, does go off track, so you make an effort to keep establishing it. And so this is really what right effort's about. Then when your view is straight, then when you've made that effort to get your view straight, to sustain that template, then you develop sati, mindfulness with regard to, body experience, the embodied experience with its feelings, the citta, the sensitivities that arise within that, and the skillful, unskillful dhammas. That if you sustain that, what occurs is a consolidation of citta. It's no longer straggling this way, that way, jagged, racing, slumping. It's steady. And its energies consolidate. And that's called Samadhi. Consolidated energy. Firm. And bear in mind, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, this is not concentration on some object. This is a state of being collected. So it's not object concentration, it's subject concentration. You could say you're not concentrating on something, you are having a collected, gathered, steadied mind. Sometimes it says, the object of concentration, but in this, when it's said like that, it often means the object of concentration is relinquishment. In other words, it's an aim. That is my intention, so that's my object, to learn how to relinquish. There's no concentrating on the breath, for example. There's mindfulness, and if you do that steadily enough, what happens? It resists the hindrances, it collects and gathers around what's skillful, it nourishes and sustains the heart. Heart's not running out, it collects, that's what happens. There's a process there, one segues into another. So this really helps to understand, so you know how to meditate, not getting too fixated on objects, because it's a different set of protocols for cultivation of citta, cultivation of citta bhavana, samadhi bhavana, from operating in the sense world. Sense world, you want to focus on something, you peer into it. You peer into the object, you move the object around, you decide what you can do about it. When cultivating citta, you step back from the object, noticing how it's affecting you. Right? So you get close by stepping back. You step back from the object, and you get close up to, that's how the subject is being affected. Right? And trembling, dull, resistant, excited, whatever, joyful. So then you're working on that, so it's purification of that engagement with phenomena, of how stuff hits, tingles, strikes, slides. There's your focus. And so it's based upon disengagement, viveka. That's the first step. So appamada, heedfulness, you acknowledge there is a step to be taken. And we say, sometimes we say it's just a pause, when you're about to get, going on something, just check, pause, lift, disengage, what's happening. Rushing, worrying, proliferating. Okay, stop. Let's just relax a bit. Come into your body, take an out breath, feel the space around you, feel the ground beneath you. It's okay. Everybody gets this. And if you're doing this patiently, viveka, disengaging, heedfulness, acknowledging there is that step to be made, and one should be proficient of that, staying alert, staying tuned in, staying on your feet, rather than spinning out into your head. And compassionately, this is not that subtle, is it? And yet, you just realize, even that, the mind doesn't want to do it. Rush off, jump out. No, it's a habit. We're learning to moderate through many, many ways. Through the way we behave, way we speak, when we speak, how we do things, when we wait, when we pause, we find our time. Getting out of the running mania of the race. 10 seconds. Okay. Not that difficult. And yet, you realise the tremendous push there is to not do that. This is asava, flood. Translated sometimes, olga is the other word for it, olga, which means a flood. They're synonymous. So it's flooding, welling up, pushing, driving experience, rushes on. Asava of becoming, get on to the next thing. There's a thing to get onto. So it generates this push. Get into something. Feeding on sense data. And ignorance. Don't waste, don't pause for a moment. Keep going. Pausing is bad for you. It's uncomfortable, it's unnecessary, it's ignoble, it's stupid, it's a waste of time. It should be prompt, should be immediate. No. So I always like to, and I even suggest something, saying, well, suggest something, then in your own time, let me know how you think about that. Not immediately right now. I don't want immediate right now. On anything. I want you to just And then the training, give each other that little bit of space. And yet we feel we should hurry up, be obedient, snap into things. No, we're obedient to the Dhamma. And it doesn't start until you get that reference to citta and steadying yourself. And this can be pretty quick when you get used to it. It's just even giving yourself those pause moments. Maybe so, just speeding up, rushing around in your head. Maybe so. Just take a break and lift. How does this look from a disengaged state? Example of the aerial photography. How when you're on the ground, like in hammer wood, all you see is the earth and the bracken and the heather. And then when you get in an airplane, go up 150 feet, you can see the outlines of an old fort. Oh yeah, how could you not see it before? You're too close, that's how come you didn't see it. You're into it, into the sense object. So we lift from the sense object, and not averse lift, not don't want it, but just want to sense how that's affecting the heart. And then the response is to come from the heart, from citta, from awareness, rather than from just the reflex. Ricochet effect. We're bouncing around like billiard balls. But in that, you definitely wait for that 5 seconds. You don't move off onto something else. Just stay in place and take it in, and then. So mindfulness is holding that template. It's not in that you lift and then drift off somewhere else, space out, or stay awake in that. So really getting that as a way of life. It doesn't have to be that long. Sometimes you're already in an alert, attuned state. And this is the basis of Samadhi, based upon Viveka. And the sense of when that's cultivated, and you linger in that step back state where you're actually sensing the heart, sensing your awareness, sensing your subject, if you like, I don't know where to put it, because it's not an object. It's coming back into yourself, you could say. Not the personality jumble, but something more primary. Primary. Awareness, you could say. Presence, you could say. And then you steady that. You can then, this needs some steadying, breathing in, breathing out. Whatever your meditation theme is that steadying effect. Steadying, refreshing. Then there's a quality of piti, refreshment. So it's bright. And then feeling your energy start to get more bright, and then ease. The energies can be quite exciting, so we just ease. Just relax a little, rest in that. This naturally brings around a kind of consolidation of energy, because even the energy of happiness, we're not getting proliferating around it, or emotionally overcooking it. Just, this feels good. That's a feeling. and steadying. And this is where we begin to cultivate more deeply this sense of non-clinging to feeling, perceptions, activations, form, consciousness, the aggregates. Samadhi is associated with, at least right samadhi, is the support for wisdom. And there's a bit of a thing because there's a whole school of thought which is, you get into this samadhi, get into jhana, get sort of into this hyper state, and then total stillness, but you can't develop any wisdom from that. Because the mind can't move, it can't reflect. Well, I imagine there's many things you could do with your mind, and perhaps that's one of them. But when you look at what the Buddha said, he said, well, when my mind was bright and concentrated, I directed it towards the elimination of the asava. So, directed? How could it be directed if it can't move? It turns it away from the aggregates, saying, recognizing these aggregates are a bit stressful, turns away. This is sublime, this is peaceful. The stilling of activations, sankharas, relinquishment of acquisitions, destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. Directed it. Even within cultivation of jhana, saying even if going through that, directed it. So you can direct from this, you can direct it to formless states, or you can direct it to the elimination of the asava. So seemingly there's some ability to shift and move something. But if you're focusing on an object, you get hypnotized by that, clamping onto that, whatever effects, then perhaps you can't. But I don't see this is what the Buddha was talking about. It's so often reiterated. Standard formula, directing it towards the ending of the asava. Well, like, when the energy is bright and steady, it's still, but it can see, it can realize. Just like if your hands are very still and steady, you can discern the movement of air brushing over them, because they're not thrashing around, but they can notice that, right? And you can detect, say if you're touching something without moving your hands, you can detect different textures, warmth in it, the roughness, the smoothness of an object, without moving your hands, because the hands are sensitive. Similarly, without moving your citta is sensitive, so it can discern, this is where the rough stuff starts, this is where the agitation begins, this is where it releases. You don't have to move it, because it is sensitive. Right? So then so that sense of where is the ease in this, where is the release in this? This is where it builds up. Pressure builds up. The agitations begin at this place. And they relinquished there. And these are called the aggregates. Turning away from, and what are these? So now this may sound very remote. It's good to consider. Buddhists, there is a development of concentration whereby one is in the world of form but not percipient of it. It's development of concentration whereby one is in the world of form but not percipient of it. And yet one is percipient, one's not numbed out. So yes, there is. So if you look in the Anguttara Nikaya, Tens, Book of the Tens, Sutta 6, 7, this particular teaching is given. Sounds remote, but then we have to, it's really a teaching about the nature of perception. And as you know, you begin to get a sense of what's in that word, perception. Something is grouped together that reminds you of that. Something is brought together. What do I mean? It's certain. So, in one sense, obvious sense, we see somebody wearing a shirt or a hat, called blue. So it refers to the category of blue. That particular sense of data is focused on, and we associate it with blue. This is a very obvious one. You take something like a cloud. Look in the cloud. It looks like it reminds me of a scoop of ice cream. Right? What happens? It reminds me of a scoop of ice cream, that cloud. Or it reminds me of a back of a sheep, fluffy and woolly. Or it looks like a grey slab to me. Right? That hit. And then the movement of delight or gloom or agitation that occurs with that. Something is seen, measured, the impression of it touches the heart, and some kind of mood arises. Would it be possible to see something without that inner movement? Perhaps not. World of sense when we're in that. But in the world of bhavana, the inner world, we're just contemplating what arises in the heart. Is it possible to experience subtle qualities of feeling, impression, without labeling, clinging and agitating around them? The most obvious perceptions would be, of course, memories. So we might practice with that, the memories, or of course the plans. They're time-bound. So often perception in the mind is to do with establishing the familiar norms. This is Thursday, that's Christmas, this is a year ago, she's this, he's going to be that, I should be this. It's established these entities, aren't they, that we can then orient around. But when you contemplate in your bhavana, that entity, that's called something that's become. This is what becoming is about. It creates fixed things, right? So having created Christmas, I can think about where I'm going to go, who I'm going to send a Christmas card to, or whether I like it or don't like it, whether you can meet people or not. All this movement starts going. And what are we talking about? Perception arose, it was clung to, becoming, it became solid. Having become solid, there's a sense of me responding to that, getting stirred by it. Energies start moving around. Perhaps I can remember wonderful Christmases I had, or how fed up I am with having to go through this same old ritual every year. So you get some emotional movement around it. Right? And this is a pretty neutral one compared with some things that can occur. Yeah? And like what we've created, completely fabricated, created perception, activation, sankharas. Things get formed, it's formations. Having created a form, there's adherence to that form. there's rejoicing in it, there's aversion to it, there's worry about it, the whole stirring up of turbulence. So perception, is it possible for that perception to arise, just be seen as, oh, that's a perception, that's an impression, not moved, not shaken, not averse, not defending, not complaining, not judging, not justifying, not proliferating, and just perceptions arisen. So when they asked Sariputta, when he was talking about this particular realization, he said, well, what did happen when you're in that state of samadhi? He says, well, what happened was these little perceptions arose, like sparks from a fire. The perception was, Nibbana is the end of becoming, end of forming things, just that realization that, you have to form a present, a past, a future, a person, an entity, a self, a good, a bad, just don't have to form. Yeah. Non-proliferation. That's a state of mind is still gathered together, still steadied, not leaking, not running out, not running around. So, obviously for functioning consciousness in the world in general, we need these orientation points, don't we? Names, addresses, times, places. Yeah. But what's significant is how these names, addresses, times and places can stir us up. Become more than just orientation points, but become obsession points, fixation points. And then all proliferations occur, flood, worry. Rehearsing old stories again and again. There's this kind of asava of ignorance, because it's almost like something's pushing in to keep the becoming going. So you're not becoming anything much in the present, so let's dig up the past and become something in terms of what I was, or all this stuff old memories start spewing up. It's an instinct, this becoming, it's a reflex. That's why you need that sense of effort, sustained, deliberate application of energy to just check and stabilize, and feel satisfied. And why samadhi is a satisfying steadiness. And it's measured in different kinds of, it's also a heartful impression. Yeah, so it's not a focus on getting an accurate reading of something, because it's measured, first one's measured in terms of rapture and ease, first two, then just ease, then equanimity. So these heartful tones are there. Because that's what you're dealing with. Not your thinking, object-focusing mind, but the sensitivity of awareness. We call that sensitivity, we call it heart, want of a better word. And it doesn't get dry, bleak, it feels comfortable. So there isn't that desperation to find something stimulating to think about. And it's steady, so there's not the need to go into the past or the future to dig things up to get playing with. So this is definitely, clears. So we're able to review the fundamental qualities of how things arise. Perception, the triggering, the trembling. Is it possible to experience the movement of a perception, that sustain an impression, without sustaining it? Because this acts as the beginning of the process of consciousness. Consciousness in this sense is the locator. It locates us. If we're located in the visual field, we find ourselves oriented around, I'm in West Sussex, I'm in Chithurst, I'm in the Dhamma hall. That's visual consciousness. Of course, mental consciousness always chips in with its perceptions. This means that cessation of consciousness doesn't mean you've died. It means the mental consciousness is no longer doing that. It's no longer labeling, I am in this. It's just seeing, hearing, touching. And then, so that sense of being located in the sense fields is a problem. Once you're in there, then your heart is naturally affected by the perceptions that arise around that. And you notice whenever you stay anywhere, like many of us have been here in this particular situation for many months now, certainly a year and a half or so. Every day looks like I'm at Cittaviveka. It's not a bad place to be at all. But then, is it true? To what extent is it true? Or is it more often the case that I'm in excitement, agitation, thought realms? I'm located within where my consciousness takes its foundation. Now, if it doesn't take a foundation on locating, this is called cessation of consciousness. It's just open. And really, isn't that more the truth of the matter? It sounds kind of weird and non-functional, but actually, isn't that the truth of the matter? That the visual appearance happens. It's not like a constant. You're walking around. Oh, I'm in the Dhamma hall, right? It's not. These locations happen to you. Isn't that the case? You walk past a tree and you get the fragrance of the fruit, pops in, and there you are in that for a moment. And then it changes to something else. The fact that what we pick up is shifting through the sense spheres doesn't indicate we're actually not in them, but they come into us. Right? And it's the mind that keeps stitching it all together. So here I am walking around in Cittaviveka, and there's the smell of the apples, and there's the sound of the birds, and there's the feeling of the wind. It's all mingled together. But actually, what's happening is there's a sight, a sound, a touch, pops in, is remembered, triggers something, and we build this solid perception, builds up right? But if you take any one of them, the smell of the apple tree is not Cittaviveka, the wind is not Cittaviveka, the sight is not Cittaviveka. Where's that? And where are you? So one of those kind of meditative questions that are used sometimes in teaching is, where are you? Where's the I? Is it the seen? No. If it was just the seer, what happens when your eyes close? The I is still there. If it's the hearer, what happens when there's silence? The I is still here. The subject is still here. What happens when it gets on a train? The subject is still here. Nothing moving. Right? Sight, sounds, locations of consciousness change all the time. Why we can notice them change is because, essentially, we're the stillness. But you can't detect it because it's the subject. It's, so you're looking for it, but you can't find it. Because it's not out there, it's back here. And so that's realized through an increasing sense of balance, dispassion, towards objects, perceptions, and perceptions are really the moment when something goes in. Right? Which is seen, oh, that's Gladys. Dong. Oh, that's Venerable so-and-so. Dong. Oh, busy. By itself, natural feature of our life. We couldn't operate without that. But when we sit quietly, do we need to do that? So when is it just habitual and when is it necessary? When is it coming from some kind of instinct to creating a world? When is it actually suitable? Or when is it coming from this reflex instinct of becoming, creating a world that I could organise and get sorted out and get comfortable in? But it never gets sorted out, and it never gets that comfortable. Where the encouragement is turning away. It doesn't mean turning away in terms of blinding oneself, but it's like one loses one's interest. You might say, it's a figure of speech. There's a withdrawal of passion, engagement. And this actually makes our lives more comfortable because you can still, from that place of solidity and strength, you can still operate, but the heart isn't lurching over into it, driving forward. So this turning is a turning of wisdom, discernment, returning to the source. In any given moment, where am I? This is sublime, this is peaceful, the cool calming of activations, relinquishment of acquisitions, habits, destruction of craving, dispassion, ceasing, nibbana. So this is, once again, this is not about an elimination of sense data or life in the world. It's about cleaning the slate of your own heart, so you can function more coolly, calmly, clearly when you're dealing with phenomena, and you can also withdraw and drop it when you don't need it. And so this way the Eightfold Path is not broken into where you can be in the world, you can be, you don't leave. It's somewhere you just come to the right place within all that, where one can cultivate right livelihood rather than be, strung out in it. Right effort without straining and without drifting. The effort to steady, firm up, know what can be firmed up and steadied, and how. So this is where all the conventions arise from. The skillful conventions arise from this. Once we understand how perceptions activate us, how those activations flood us, how the flooding becomes a person entrapped in a world, thrashing around, trying to find a way out. How all that happens, triggered by perceptions, impressions. So as we practice, come into direct practice, this day, just you having spent some time in our lives, but certainly much more supported, mutually supported by our mutual adherence to resolution and to these forms of practice. Really begin to review how process, how existence happens, how this becoming into be happens, and how it can be softened, stepped back from, and released.